Hello everybody, following on from the Skills versus Capacities task set by Dan this week, I'm going to be looking at the exercise of the squat jump. I'll be looking at two different athletes as asked of in the task, and I'll be comparing the Skills versus Capacities scenario that has been set. Furthermore, I'll be looking at how the two components interlock and how well they transfer to sporting skills and environments. So firstly, let's look at my two athletes in real time from a front view. I want you to just have a look at the two exercises placed upon them. Yes, they're both squat jumps, but they are slightly different in skills. This is something I've done deliberately as I want to touch on what may be required for the slightly different things, but the capacities that may be relevant to each. So athlete 1 is required to perform 6 loaded squat barbell jumps, whereas as you'll see in just a second, athlete 2 is required to take 6 unloaded body weight squat jumps. And what we'll look at in just a sec is the impact that has on the skill that is required. So just slowing down the two frontal views of the squat jump so we can have a look at it in more depth. Going to discuss some of the skill requirements needed to perform this exercise. Ability to flex the ankle, knee and hip joints in turn give you the ability to extend the three joints to their full capacities and ultimately express what is required in the jumping mechanism of the squat jump. My first point has almost immediately made it apparent that the two of skill and capacity interlock together to make us able to express and perform the tasks that are required for this exercise. We know movement that is in this task, having the ability to flex the three joints through full range of motion, will then transfer in us being able to have the capacity to generate the velocity required to get up and off the floor, which in turn is classified as power. Without having the skill to perform the movement, you will not have the ability to then express what is required in the form of jumping. So does that mean if I don't have full range of motion in these areas, I will not be able to jump? Well, that is a question we need to answer. These athletes use slightly different skill mechanisms to jump, but both still get off the floor. We know that skills are task driven, and we know relevant capacity building interlocks to the way we load, perform and execute movement patterns. Deliberately chosen two different genders to perform the jumps and two different styles of jumping. That is barbell on back loaded versus unloaded with arm driving, as well as one in weightlifting shoes versus the other without. For me, it is important to understand that the tasks placed upon these two athletes are slightly different, and the skill requirements for them to perform the two different style of jumps, although pretty similar, will impact the capacities that the two of them will develop over time, if loaded, if periodized, etc., etc. Gender's role plays a part on the way the structures are loaded and on the way the two athletes perform the two tasks. Both athletes have varied and similar tightnesses and weaknesses. Both shift to the left from the hip, and torso placements are entirely different. It is up to us as coaches to decide what is safe, effective, and ultimately what is going to produce the capacity that we want to mimic when we are training these athletes. Our ability to decelerate the force placed upon you and ultimately express through the jump in an accelerative manner is a capacity that is built over time. However, the skill that is the way we move, the way the stretch reflex is utilized, is a skill. And again, the transfer of the way in which the two interlock are something as coaches we must consider and must understand. Will both the athletes develop the ability to squat jump in the same way? No. They're both loaded differently, they both move differently, and they're going to both express and develop different capacities over time. Overall, it is important to understand how much weight needs to be given to the individual's needs for skill or capacity, and ultimately understand how transferable the things we are placing on them impact their sport or outcome. What we are working with, how long do we have, and how much difference can we make are questions we must ask ourselves as coaches.